what do you think they're doing, the Packers, right? What do you do you think that this entire approach, forget the Jordan Love pick for a moment, right? I think you can almost put that on its own island out here, that that's a sort of independent decision that, hey, we like this quarterback and we're going to prepare for the future whenever that comes, right? In addition to that, like everything they did from that point on, I think speaks to a certain direction that they're moving offensively. And I've heard multiple different sort of opinions about what that is. What's your take? What do you think they're doing?
I think it's lessening the pressure on the quarterback. I think it's LaFleur who has McVay ties and Shanahan ties, and they're all tied together, right? And they all run a system, and they run a system that's QB independent. And there's a history in the system of success with numerous quarterbacks: Matt Schaub, Kirk Cousins, Jared Goff, Jimmy Garoppolo. Granted, the 1 year that we always put these tiered quarterbacks, right? The 1 year or 2 years Kyle Shanahan had a tier 2 or better quarterback, and that's Matt Ryan. Mm-hmm. And one of those years was a tough transition, and the second year was MVP Matt Ryan, who almost broke the league statistically. So there's a history of quote-unquote tier 3 quarterbacks who become products of the system. And I think for LaFleur and for the Packers, it's this buy-in to, like, we got to trust our system. We're not building around Rodgers. We're going to build a system through which he can flourish. So I don't know that they're necessarily wrong there. And if I can get some things to load here, I would pull up some numbers. I think everything's broken right now.
Buy you a couple of seconds by giving you a little training camp nugget.
I don't need any seconds. I think.
Oh, okay.
Is Ultimate not loading right now? What's happening here? Rick?
See if I care.
Texting Rick.
See if I care.
No, buy me some seconds.
Jarrett Stidham has thrown a 7th interception in the last 72 hours in training camp.
Oh, man.
I mean, it's training camp, right? So it doesn't actually mean anything.
There we go. Last year, that was Garoppolo.
Right. But remember there was a period where people were losing their minds because Patrick Mahomes couldn't stop throwing interceptions in training camp.
Oh, yeah.
It's like Patrick Mahomes took like a week to learn Andy Reid's system. And in that week, he threw like 800 interceptions. And then from that week onwards, he's been like the greatest quarterback the league's ever seen.
Yeah, I think Rodgers threw a bunch a few years ago too, and like they were making that. I think he was making this point. He's like, sometimes we're just trying stuff.
Right.
And you're like, hey, there's triple coverage. I wonder if I can squeeze it in there. Yeah. Like, just you're doing different things. Here's what I think partially they're trying to do. I look at Rodgers over the last couple of years. He's okay throwing, short game type of stuff and everything. I think they're trying to take that away. Right. They're just trying to take the ball out of his hands more, which will, again, the same thing as Stafford, the same thing as Russell Wilson. If this leads to more intermediate level throws and deeper throws, which Rodgers is more than capable of making, he might actually produce more, but on like 100 fewer attempts. I think that's what they're trying to draw up.
Yeah, it's the difference in emphasis, right? There's a lot of people that are like, well, they don't believe in Aaron Rodgers anymore. They're trying to take the ball out of his hands. They're trying to go to this run-heavy offense where Rodgers has less of an impact, right? And I think, and then the other way of emphasizing that is, I think they are of the opinion, and I'm with you on this, is that in this system, like this is an inherently quarterback-friendly system, right? It makes average quarterbacks look good. Mm-hmm. So what does it do to a good quarterback? Like in theory,
it should make him great.
In theory, it should take a good quarterback, a Matt Ryan, and make him into an MVP, right? So whilst you are taking volume out of Aaron Rodgers' hands, you're asking him to do things less often. It maximizes the impact of what you're asking him to do. So we're going to give him the ball less, but with a view that when he actually has the ball, he's now throwing a schemed up 30-yard bomb over the middle over play action that wasn't there beforehand, right? So I do think that they are of the opinion that if we get this offense cooking the way the 49ers were, Rodgers looks like an all-pro again, right? Not the guy that's like 10 to 15 in the PFF grades. He goes back to being vintage Aaron Rodgers or somewhere near that.
Yeah, and I guess, we would again, in that system, and I've talked to people in the system and all that stuff, like there's this belief that the run game is tied to play action and all that stuff. And in theory, there is, as far as like you make everything looks the same. There's a lot of outside zone and bootleg off of that and play action, deep crossers and all that fun stuff, right? At the same time, we also wouldn't say like, man, you really got to make sure like you get Aaron Jones as 20 carries and then A.J. Dillon's going to get his 10. Like I still wouldn't take the ball out of Rodgers' hands, even though it hasn't looked as pretty the last couple of years as it had, in 2014 and 2016 and other points in his career. I think the other point is the mistake teams make. What the last thing that they saw.
Yeah.
That's my bigger issue with this stuff. Like everything we said philosophically is okay. Rodgers getting older, we're going to take a little off his plate, fine. But if it's fueled by the last thing you saw, and the last thing you saw was the best team in the NFC last year,
yeah,
throwing the ball 8 times in a game and running the ball down your throat. Yes. That's the last thing you saw. So the last thing you saw was I had bad run defense. They ran all over me, and they didn't even need a quarterback.
Right.
And I need to emulate that. That would be the mistake.
I think there's a huge portion of this that's fueled by almost exactly that, right? They looked across to the other sideline in the NFC Championship game and thought, like, this is what this offense is supposed to look like, right? What is currently being done to us is what our offense should look like. So how do we create that? And they've gone like, right, let's draft a monstrous running back. Let's draft a weird H-back hybrid to take the Kyle Juszczyk role. Like, let's try and craft that in one off season. And sure, I mean, that is, like, it can look like that, but equally there were games, the San Francisco New Orleans game where Jimmy Garoppolo had to air it out and they had to come from behind and had to make big plays through the air. Like, that offense was just damn good. Like, they beat the crap out of you on the ground and, stomped all over you because your run defense was garbage that game. But that's like, that specific way is not how that offense won every single week. So if you're trying to replicate that, it's questionable. Plus, there's a difference between having Jimmy Garoppolo as your quarterback and having Aaron Rodgers. Like, it's the Russell Wilson argument again, right? It's how much does taking the ball out of his hands help him be efficient versus how much should you just be letting Russ cook? And I think the same argument is there with Aaron Rodgers. Like, we've seen him be amazing when he's been the guy. So how much should you be actively trying to take the ball out of his hands?
It's just the perception of what happens on plays is just so different, right? So I'm looking at Aaron Rodgers the last 2 years on all throws up to 9 yards, just as a proxy. Like, let's say they're going to take away some of the short pass game and replace it with runs. Aaron Rodgers has averaged 6.3 yards per attempt, which is middle of the pack here. 6.3 yards per attempt on those passes up to 9 yards. So if you're like, man, we're going to take the ball out of we'll let him attack down the field and it'll be off play action, he'll have more opportunities, but we're going to take away the short stuff and replace it with runs. Like, the average run is 4 yards, 4.1 or whatever. The average pass attempt is 6.3. And then, of course, you have sacks in there too, but there's not a ton of sacks when you're working quick game. So even just like the premise of like, we'll take some off his plate and we're going to run the ball more, like, you're going to be less efficient offensively on those plays, on the short stuff. And what I'm saying is the difference is, like, Aaron Rodgers throwing an incompletion feels like this massive failure, where like a 2-yard run is like, all right, it's not a win, but like we're at least moving forward. When the reality of like 2nd and 8 and 2nd and 10 is almost negligible. Like, that's not that big of a difference. And I think that's where the offense, the system and stuff as a whole is coming from.
Thanks for watching the PFF YouTube channel. And if you want to subscribe, all you have to do is push the button. Don't forget everything you get. A little fantasy, push the button. A little green line for the gambling aspects of the game, push the button. College football, push the button. The YouTube channel from PFF.